So just to kick things off, can you tell me how you got involved in directing this episode?
Sure. Basically after the first season, we had such a good working relationship between the art department and the writing team and the creative executives that kindly Kevin Wright, our EP, and Eric Martin, our head writer, asked me to join the writer's room for season 2. So I was in the writer's room for season 2 and helping to come up with some of these kind of essential ideas of this season. And one thing led to another, and I got an opportunity to direct one of the episodes. The exact episode that it was going to be, it was a little tricky to figure out because it was a function of schedule, because I had to design the whole season first. So we had to kind of see which one was going to be the last one to shoot, because that was going to be the one that was most realistic for me to direct, because most of the design work has already been done at that stage. And I was very lucky that the one that fell to the end of the schedule was 203.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I feel like it's the perfect one for you, especially because it's so design heavy and there's so much new things to look at. But that just takes me to my next question, which is about this whole like Chicago World Fair. It looks amazing. And I'm so glad that you guys went there, because that's like one of my favorite aspects of history to look at, especially American history. But can you talk about this season's, just the look of this season and creating the look of this season, and especially of this episode? I mean, like even like the production of like seeing the loom and seeing the stage performance. I mean, it was all great.
Thank you so much. It's nice of you to say. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the TVA, there was a great opportunity this season in that we're going to new corners of the TVA that we didn't get to see in the first season. And because we're spending a lot of our time dealing with the loom and dealing with the RNA, kind of basically, it's all taking place on a level that I call the systems level, which is basically the infrastructure or the foundation of the TVA. These spaces had to exist first before the spaces that we saw in season 1 could exist. If you think of the temporal loom as like a power plant mixed with this maintenance apparatus for organizing time, and you think of the RNA as the kind of nexus of TVA technology and maintenance, these places had to exist first. So they were inspired by, if the first season was inspired by the mid-60s, this season was inspired by the mid-50s as more of a Cold War earlier feeling in terms of the palette of greens, which are very institutional palette from that era, to the fortified feeling of like a bunker. And in terms of the World's Fair and the 1970s, this was a season where we got to do some more of that. We're jumping around to different eras, and that was super fun to do. And yeah, the World's Fair was fantastic because it was a challenge in that, like I was saying, that we spent most of the season, we spent a lot of time in the TVA. And so when you're building a big set that you get to use in multiple episodes, it's easy to sort of justify the cost of it. It's trickier with the episode I ended up directing because we're only in those sets for one episode, and yet they need to be big and feel fully realized and fleshed out. So that was just the challenge, is always, building as much as you need, but not more than you need, and finding the smartest way to ask for help from our brilliant VFX team, led by Chris Townsend and Sandra Balaj, and to help us flesh out the world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it paid off. I think this whole season has looked really great. I love seeing all these, these very tangible sets. It looks, it's amazing. But okay, so looking at this episode, we finally get to meet Victor Timely in this show. And he's obviously very different from these other versions of Kang that we've met before, which I think is great. But what made you guys decide to focus on this version of his character and turning him sort of into almost like a con man or like a trickster?
Sure. I think that we were sort of trying to find an interesting new version of Kang, and also one or a Kang variant, and one that would sort of subvert expectations, but most importantly, feed the needs of this season's story arc. And in terms of Timely himself, he was just inspired by these the Einsteins of the world, this archetype of this creative, quirky thinker who's operating on a level much, 7 levels higher than everybody around him, and yet in some ways, as a result, is awkward and can't connect on a kind of more basic level. So we took this person that had all this brilliant potential in form of this child, and then Renslayer in his minutes give him this like critical piece of super advanced technological knowledge that sets him on this path. In terms of the charlatan con man element of it, like, to me, I've always thought of that as like, it's a sort of a survival mechanism. You're talking about a Black man who's trying to be an inventor in the late 19th century, and like the very nature of even the World's Fair, like, why is he presenting this in the Hofbrau at the Midway instead of the Machine Hall in the White City? All those things were sort of part of it. And so I think it's like it's a survival mechanism on the one hand, and on the other hand, he's stuck with the fact that these ideas are not cons. His technological designs are truly brilliant, but the technology to execute them doesn't exist in his era. And so that's sort of where you're seeing him stuck, in between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's an interesting, calling it sort of a survival mechanism, I think is very accurate, because you see him, he's just like, he's on the move at all times. And he's he's not actually, trying to fool people, I think, in the way that Loki might. But I think it's an interesting sort of play on that dynamic. But another big twist that we see in this episode comes in the form of Miss Minutes, who it's revealed that she has some unrequited feelings for He Who Remains, and of course every Kang variant, I guess, by proxy. Can you talk about digging into that character more and making her more human? And also, are we seeing the rise of a new villain because of this?
That was honestly one of the most fun and weird curveballs we got to chase this season, for me at least. And like, this is this idea. I think we're flirting with this notion of this, like, of a singularity, and this, what happens when you get an AI that's getting too real, that's getting too sophisticated, and then in the case of Miss Minutes, one that's been around a long time. That's been around since the beginning with him. And there's the comedy of seeing her show up with all this baggage and projecting it on Timely, who's just a new variant. He has no context for any of this. He doesn't know what she's talking about. And she's projecting all the baggage that she has from He Who Remains onto him. And then, of course, there's this like triangle between her and Renslayer, and who are allies of convenience. They're not naturally bonded, but they need each other. And then they both, in parallel to that relationship, they both have their own connection to Timely that's distinct and at odds. So that was just super fun to play with this episode.
Yeah, I think it was definitely, it surprised me the most on my first watch, but then I was like, yeah, no, this kind of makes sense. And then there's this big fight scene that we see at the end of the episode, and we see, Ravonna and Loki and Mobius and Sylvie all come together with Timely. And we've kind of seen this throughout the episode of Loki and Sylvie kind of facing off. And it's kind of a duplicate of their argument from the last season, which is, do we kill him or do we take his place? Do we fix this? I'm just curious if you fall on one side of that argument. Do you think there's a right or wrong in this response, in their responses?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's hard to say. I think that they both have valid points, and because we can't know how it's going to turn out, it's hard to say either of them are wrong. But I do feel like there's maybe an easier way to say it is that there is a more empathetic view, and one that maybe we're as a species we're better served taking, if giving the benefit of the doubt. And I think that like the plea that Timely makes to Sylvie, that he's not who she says he is. She doesn't know that he's not going to become He Who Remains. I think it highlights in her the hypocrisy of her own view, that like of free will, that we have the potential to determine our own, destiny and who we're going to become. And yet she's here to kill this man because she assumes she knows who he's going to become. So I think that's generally, I don't know, I think the world would be better if people made fewer assumptions about other people,
Yeah, definitely. Well, this was an amazing episode, and I really want to thank you for talking with me. I can't wait to see what else you have in your directing future, because this was just a very fun episode to watch. And I want to thank you for spending time with me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.